Okay, hello everybody. I'd like to talk a little bit about my experiences of installing the Newall NMS300 to the Harrison M300 lathe. Although I'm a long-time engineer, I've never fitted a DRO before. Let me start off with the positives, because I do make some criticisms of certain elements of the product in other parts of this video chain. The positives are the general product is good quality, the display is easy to use once you get to grips with it, all the brackets and other hardware, from the cables down to the smallest screw and so on, are all excellent quality. It comes beautifully packaged in quite rugged packaging that gives no cause to worry with regards to damage, and there are plenty of fixtures and fittings, and again all of those are good quality. I primarily made this series of videos because when I was looking for a DRO system for my Harrison lathe, I didn't know which one to buy. I'd never fitted a DRO to anything, and I set out searching and wanted to buy one that was close to home if I could, if it was affordable. The NMS300 is keenly priced for the domestic market, and certainly competitive. The main reason for making the video is that there is almost nothing on the internet. In fact, I couldn't find anything specific to the Harrison M300 and the Newall NMS300 system. So I thought I'd do this if it helps anybody. The downsides are mainly to do with some of the bracketry. Not quality, but suitability, which I'll come to in later videos. And I think the fact that this is sold as a dedicated kit. When you go online, if you type into Google or any other search engine, Harrison M300 DRO, this is one of the kits it will lead you to. And it isn't sold as a kit that's suitable for this and 4 or 5 other lathes. It is sold just for this lathe, and specific to the short bed too. But the only thing I can honestly say that I think is truly tailored to this lathe is the length of the scales, which I had no problems with at all. Okay, see you in part 2. Before I remove the covers, I just want to say a couple of things about the cross-slide cover and the way I've not only attached it, but also it occurred to me that it was worth making some effort to seal it against the edge of the cross-slide. I'm going to zoom in for a moment. Here obviously is my cross slide, here is the cover, and this is a piece of silicone. It's only about 6mm wide and it's 2mm thick. I've continued that right away along the length, so effectively I have a seal between this and this. So from a point of view of ingress of dirt, fluids and everything else, that should improve that. Okay, it's not recommended by Newall, there's no reason why it should be. I just thought it was, let's say, a worthwhile addition. And as I say, it continues along the other length, at the full length. Okay, this is the single point mounting for the scale. You can see the scale here, the black line. and I start off by saying that this black bracket here is the bracket supplied with the kit for mounting this scale. The bracket obviously is counterbored here and bored through for the M3 screw here, and the jacking point screws of course are here, or the threads for them. There is no way that this bracket is adequate for this installation. So again, I have to stress, this was sold as for this lathe. So unless anybody knows differently, I'd like to know how you use this bracket for this lathe. First and foremost, if you mount it at this height, the centre height of the scale means that your cover will be quite a bit higher than your cross slide top face. That reduces your swing. I lost probably about 2mm by the time I'd fitted the seal. I worked out that you'd lose at least 8 or 9mm on the swing, and to put that into context, that's 16 to 18mm on the diameter of anything you may wish to turn. I don't think that's acceptable. So you might say, why not fit this in the slot? Well, you can't. This bracket is wider than the slot, as you see, which means you cannot fit it against this face here, and that's the only flat part. You need to be able to fit it somewhere between here and here. In other words, this surface here needs to be here. It can't be up here, certainly from a point of view of the bolt hole, because you can't drill here because of this V. This V is standard on the Harrison cross slide and runs the full length of the cross slide on both sides. I made a piece to fill in here, and one thing to note here, if you're going to do this, is that whilst this angle is 90 degrees, this angle here is not 45. So in other words, it's this is not just a question of taking a piece of square steel and taking it off corner to corner. So you need to be very careful when you make this, and I ended up hand finishing this to get a perfect line here, to get a perfect surface here. I made this bracket and obviously put all the jacking points in, but my mounting bolt, which I think you can just see here, I think you can just see the mounting bolt there, actually fixes into this surface here, and the bracket clears by about 1/10 thou there, and a similar amount against this surface here, between the surface here. So the bracket is much more comprehensive than this one. One thing I considered I made as a mistake was that I should have made this bracket taller here, so that when I mount the cover I had sufficient height. In the end I had to make a brass packing piece, which is the purpose of this. So this surface here is where the cover mounts. Okay, this is the opposite end of the cross slide scale towards the backsplash, and because it's a single end mounting scale, there's nothing here to mount the scale. I made a separate bracket, and when you do so, if you use a fixing bolt for the cover, which I have, you just need to make sure that it doesn't protrude down too much into this space. The sphericin itself is not difficult to mount. and the bracket here is one of their standard brackets to which I made no modification. I simply drilled and tapped into the cross-slide bed the appropriate amount, and when I clocked it, I set both sets of clock gauges up on both this surface and this surface and got it to within less than 1/1000th of an inch run out. I just happen to be using imperial gauges. The other thing that needs saying here is that normally when you bring your tailstock up, you would expect the tailstock to be able to contact this surface, in other words right up to the cross slide, and clearly you can't do that. You cannot allow it to smash into the cover and of course the the microsyn itself. So this is a mechanical stop which is drilled and tapped straight into the bed, and obviously it's adjustable, and this bears on the surface of the on the leading surface of the tailstock. So that is the cross-slide installation, and it works very well. You need to take a lot of care when connecting the cables, but I'll show you some details of that in a moment. Okay, resorting to handheld now, so apologies if it's a little bit shaky. Cable installation, just make up some good quality brackets and fix them properly to the saddle, and you'll have no trouble. The metal clips I tended to use throughout, with the exception of here where I use them in pairs as separators and to help keep the cables tidy. I then continue to use the metal clips underneath my tool post tray out towards the display unit. Okay, sticking with the cross slide for a moment. On the left hand side of the cross slide, here is where I solved the problem of needing the second mechanical stop, so that the mounting bracket on the scale did not run into the microsyn encoder. By fitting this stop, I have actually restricted the cross slide movement by about 8mm below its specified amount, but you can still take your tool post way beyond the centre, and if you really needed to, you could remove the mechanical stop, use 8mm, providing you kept an eye on the clearance where under there where that bracket will contact the microsyn encoder. Anyway, just carrying on here, I machined this block, fixed by a cap screw to this front surface. Obviously clearance there, about 25 thou, and a similar clearance under there. And not to forget that any clearance under there, you just need to check along its full length, just stick a feeler gauge under it. I then machined this block, these are key steel by the way. I then machined this block, and it is deliberately not snug to this surface here, because the casting here curves, and I certainly didn't want to grind that out. That would have been foolish. This is flat here, and the stop works absolutely fine. I thought quite long and hard about where I should fit this stop, because you certainly need one. Failure to put one in would be silly, and you could easily forget and go and run the cross slide hard into the microsyn reader. So that works absolutely fine. No problem with that at all. Right, let's take a look at the long axis installation. Cover is removed, and over here, of course, we have the there's the chuck end of the mounting for the Sphericin scale. You can just see the scale there. One thing I did do is I made up a drilling guide for making this drilling here to mount this. Obviously used it at both ends. It was a large, fairly substantial guide which I clamped to the bed of the lathe, having marked with a transfer punch the exact centre, and then use that transfer punch to locate the guide before doing the clamp up. You do need about 3 pairs of hands, so an assistant is good. As mentioned before, quality of the mounting hardware frankly is very, very good here. This is a particularly good one. The flexibility it offers you is pretty good, and no complaints there whatsoever. Okay, moving swiftly on, as they say. Let's take a look at the actual bracketry. Now, I really think that they missed a bit of a trick here. As you can see here, the Sphericin encoder scale mounted quite neatly there, but it is actually a combination of 3 brackets. It is this one, it is this one, which then goes along and down behind this one. Now, this gives a couple of issues. It actually makes the guard harder to fit, because in actual fact the screws here, here and here actually do get in the way of getting the guard nice and close to this surface here, which is quite an important thing if you want to protect the reader head properly, and clearly you do. So, as I say, getting the guard close to this surface is quite important, and I even took the top off the washers to do it. Now, I could have made this screw head further down this slot, which would have opened up this gap. So you could argue that's my fault. But once I'd got this head true in both planes to within 1/1000th of an inch, frankly I wasn't going to move these screws. And I only then realised my mistake after clocking the gauge, clocking the head. But nonetheless, if this had been a dedicated bracket, that would not have been necessary. Furthermore, a dedicated bracket, which would have started as a double L shape, moving up here, should, if they'd been really smart, have taken account of this, or taken advantage of this hole, and there's a corresponding one the other side, by the way. I've actually used it for my cable mounting here. But they could have used this. There's 2 existing drillings tapped to M10, and a single bracket could have come across. This is on the same surface. This is this same surface here, and that could have fixed to that. Not this one here, this one, and gone straight down there, double L shape. That bracket would have taken minutes to fit. It's a shame they didn't do that. I think it's fair to say that in all other respects the long axis actually went fairly smoothly. Most of my issues were more to do with access, because I'm quite close to my workshop wall here, and I didn't really fancy picking my lathe up. But nonetheless, I think they missed a trick. So all in all, make sure your installation is properly earthed. The actual earth connection here underneath that terminal the paint is scraped back to bare metal. The paint on these lathes is pretty thick, and I wish cars were painted like this, but it's pretty thick. And get back to metal and make sure it is properly earthed, or you will get fluctuations in your readings. Cable installation, make it nice and neat, properly secure, and well, the rest I think is down to my summary. Okay, let's summarise. At the heart of our system we have the Newall NMS300. Seems pretty straightforward once you get to grips with it, although I have nothing to compare it with. At the end of the day, you make a choice with these things. You don't go out and buy 6 and then decide which one to buy. But nonetheless, it does seem to work fine. Fitted to the Harrison M300. And I have to say, again, this is a dedicated kit recommended for this lathe and no other. So, considering this is for the domestic market, it should be assumed that a first-time user, or perhaps even a new engineer, is going to fit this. And I have to say that without the other facilities I have, I think I would have found it very difficult to fit this properly and accurately. So I have 3 main areas of concern. The microsyn scale bracket, which is the single end mount, which is the little black bracket that I mentioned several times in this video, is inadequate for the job, or simply unsuitable. The spherosyn scale bracket for the long axis, yes, we got there in the end, but that could have been so much simpler with a better designed bracket, one-piece bracket, possibly with jacking screw points or something. And documentation, or rather lack of, and or instructional videos. And I'm not talking about personal videos like this, I'm talking about from the manufacturer or possibly from the manufacturer's agent. There is a download, it should be said, for the spherosyn and microsyn specific install, which is useful, but it certainly doesn't tell you everything, and it doesn't give you any hints or tips. Newall's own website does have videos, none of them are for this unit. Whether it's the how to use the display, they're all other types. It has PDFs, one of which is the spherosyn and microsyn install document. The other one is the quick start guide, and also the full manual. And as I've said before, the full manual tells you nothing about installation. It's a user manual. As a user manual, it's generally okay, save for one error that I noticed to do with the radius or diameter settings. It has to be said that in industry, a retrofit, accessory or modification would have to carry full documentation to ensure warranty compliance and technical functionality. I don't see why the domestic market should get away with it. Perhaps as consumers we don't seem to have that power to apply to the suppliers. Good points to recap. Packaging, brilliant. Price is in line with the market and it's pretty good. And overall quality is pretty good. So I hope this video has been of use to some people, and I'd be really interested to hear from home machinists, particularly someone who's never fitted a DRO before, or even if you have fitted a DRO before, as to what your experiences are with this unit, and particularly on this lathe. But yeah, would really welcome feedback here. Okay, goodbye.